This is a blue gun simulator of Smith & Wesson's Model 10-14 revolver. It's a training simulator, so we're still going to be sure to check to make sure it's completely unloaded and the ammo is out of reach. I've already stripped the carrier of the parts from its previous fitting and laid out the parts that I think I'll be using for this fitting. I've located the 1014's data on the database page. Setting the proper width mode is the first step. This fit calls for the narrow width mode. This carrier was already in the narrow mode from the last fit, but I'm going to loosen the width lock screws a few turns. If you're unfamiliar with the width lock, check out its training video on the instructions page. Having a loose width lock is necessary for the next fitting step. When fitting a revolver to the carrier, always be sure that the cylinder face is in good contact with the bottom surface of the cylinder cutout. Also be sure that the top strap of the pistol is in good contact with the registration plate. Hold the pistol in position, then close the side plates to parallel. Now firmly tighten the two width lock screws. The registration pin or pins come next. This particular fitting only calls for one registration pin. The database only implicitly tells you which side plate to put the registration pin on. The lock anchor and pins always go on the side plate that's closest to your body. That would be the same side plate as your body attachment accessory. This fit calls for one registration pin mounted in position G10. Grid coordinates are molded into the side plate. There's also a coordinate map available on the instructions page. Use a 1/2-inch screw in this hole. The screw can be started in either side of the registration pin. Keep the pin quite loose for now. I like to do a quick fit check at this point to make sure I'm using the right plan. E13 is called out as the location for the lock shaft and anchor. A 1/2-inch screw is also used to secure the anchor. The anchor is the only component that must always be attached with a lock washer between it and the side plate. Not using a lock washer here could cause the lock to fail to open. Mount the anchor with its wide flanges away from the side plate. Leave it loose for now, pending final adjustment. This check isn't really necessary if we're following the plan, but I always like to see that the parts are in the right place. The short lock shaft is called out for this fit. The three lock shafts are differentiated by the lengths of their notched legs. The lock shaft is always located on the same grid location as the anchor, but on the opposite side plate. You could use the grid coordinates to find G13 on the opposite side plate, but there's an easier way to do this. Note that the notched end of the lock shaft always goes through the side plate. If the shaft end touches the center of the anchor, you've got the right hole for the shaft. The only guidance the database gives about which level of lock to use is in the pictures. That's because the choice of a level 2 or 3 lock is independent of the position of the internal parts of the carrier. The database picture shows a level 2 lock with 2 tabs. But today I'm using the higher level security 3 lock with a 1-tab lever. The level 2 and level 3 shrouds have identical spacing for their mounting holes. So the database guidance for holes E11 and 15 being used for the shrouds works for either level 2 or level 3. Orientation for the level 2 shroud is non-critical, but the level 3 shroud needs to be pointed correctly. The raised finger guard end of the level 3 shroud should always point toward the muzzle of the pistol. If you're using a 1-tab lever, be sure that you place it on the side of the shroud where your finger will pull it instead of push it when you're drawing. The shroud screw locations for this fit are given as E11 and E15. These locations are largely determined by where the shaft is located, but not completely. Shrouds are always aligned along a common lettered row shown in red or a common numbered row shown in green. This fitting utilizes row E as the location for the screw holes. Here's a couple of tricks I've learned that will speed the installation of the shroud. Once the screws are started, I close the side plates. Then I count 2 holes away from the anchor screw in the appropriate row. The Allen wrench then goes through that hole and it leads directly to one of the screws for the shroud. This provides easy access to the shroud screw and keeps the Allen wrench properly aligned. Tighten both shroud screws with moderate force. We complete the assembly of the lock by adding the trigger guard stop. This is the level 3 lock in its fully locked condition. Check the shroud and lever assembly for proper operation and then put the lock in its full locked condition. There's a couple things you should know that will help this part of the job go quickly. The first is that the Allen wrench and the lock shaft's outside leg should be held parallel and they should be pointing in opposite directions. This assures that the slot in the lock shaft and the set screw in the trigger guard stop will align. Now place the trigger guard stop over the lock shaft as shown in the illustration. Notice how the end of the lock shaft, which is pink in the illustration, is flush with the trigger guard stop. Now, while you hold the parts in position, firmly tighten the trigger guard stop's set screw. Always hold the short end of the Allen wrench while doing this, and use caution to not strip the part. Use sufficient force to make sure the trigger guard stop and lock shaft are immobilized relative to each other. Now do a very aggressive twist and pull test on the stop. You should feel no slop between the trigger guard stop and the lock shaft. With the carrier open, set the lock in its fully locked condition. Now close the carrier so the trigger guard stop and the anchor fully engage. The loose anchor may be manually rotated to get into proper position as shown in the illustration. Tighten the anchor screw while holding the rest of the lock steady. Firmly hold the lock lever in its fully locked position while using very heavy torque to tighten the anchor screw. As always, hold the Allen wrench by its short end while doing the operation. A level 3 lock should self-engage when simply being pushed together. A level 2 lock should be manually operated but should be smooth in operation. Place the pistol in the carrier and secure the lock. Hold the carrier so that the pistol is upside down as shown. Now rotate the loose registration pin so that it pushes the pistol firmly into the carrier. Tighten all registration pins in this manner using firm torque. Double check to be sure that the cylinder face is in registration with the cylinder cutout. Some revolver fits with a single registration pin may show a slight looseness. This is okay as long as retention is not affected. Use the thin adapter plate under most conditions. The thick adapter plate is used when clearance is needed for large cylinders. In this case, the waist attachment accessory sees no interference when rotated plus or minus 1 notch. All accessories are attached with a 1/2 inch screw. Use moderate to firm torque for these attachments. Final checkout should include vigorous manipulation of all parts. Remember to return your Allen wrench to its carrier slot. Finally, do 10 or 15 draw and recovery cycles with your revolver before carrying loaded.